Brought to you by businessblueprint.com.au.
Now we're going to talk about who are you really selling to, which is really, really important. And again, like the business you're in, a lot of us don't really know who we're selling to. You know, we're kind of nebulous about it. We work around it. We sort of think it's a really big age switch. You know, we're not specific about it. And knowing matters because selling is really about aligning identities. So if you think about it, think about, for example, Fantastic Furniture. Now, Fantastic Furniture make pretty good quality furniture for the price, right? It's okay. But they have an identity problem. They've pushed price so hard for so long that people don't want other people to know they've bought from them. They don't want to seem that cheap. I mean, so they ask, can you deliver in an unmarked van at night time? It's really interesting. If you think about Kentucky Fried Chicken, I mean, most of you in this room look old enough to remember when they were Kentucky Fried Chicken. But they had the foresight to know that the word fried was becoming a social issue. They knew that they needed to go from Kentucky Fried Chicken to KFC because fried, as Dan said before, conjures up images of fat people eating chicken out of a bucket. They didn't want to be that, so they dropped the fried. Now we've got an entire generation of people who don't know what the F word means. It's amazing, right? Because you've got to understand their values. If you know who they are, you can understand what they value. And that makes an extraordinary difference to how effective your communication is. Think about the RTA. So this is easy. What's the biggest killer on our roads? Speeding. Women drivers. Who said that? It's outrageous. Speeding. Speeding's the biggest killer on our roads. And who's the demographic most likely to speed? Young guys. So look, it's not brain surgery. Everyone in this room knows this. But for years, the RTA had been running the same kind of communication, trying to stop young men speeding by scaring them with shock tactics like this. Sorry, I'm laughing when it's funny when you haven't seen it before. But, you know, they've run ads like this to this generation and it doesn't work. Why? Young men aren't afraid of death. Death is a million miles away when you're 18 to 23. You're willing to jump off a cliff. You'll base jump. You'll bungee jump. How scared are you of dying? You're not scared, right? But what they are afraid of and what changed the RTA's effectiveness in this communication is social death. You know, and they changed this ability to speed with one tiny little thing. So you can see the difference, right? And you know, young men value social acceptance. They're not afraid of death. And what was interesting as well, and what they've done with this campaign, is they gave the community, their girlfriends, their mates in the car, a way to say, stop being a dick, without saying stop being a dick. Because, you know, it's hard to call your mates out on things like speeding, because you don't want to appear soft. So it's a really interesting thing for us to know who our customer is and what they value. Now, here's a small business. It's a divorce attorney. in Canada. They know that they're not selling settling up, they're selling getting even. This is a florist who's also a smaller business, and they know what they're selling. We got a single rose, a bunch of roses, a really, really, really big bunch of roses. Just how sorry are you? It's really simple. They know exactly who they're selling to and exactly what they value. Think about Phil and Monica, who brought family car stickers into this country. Now, they know what people value. You know, there's a quote from her, and she says, people love their families and they want to show them off. Now, I personally don't get it. I hate the things. I can think of nothing worse than having them on the back of my car. But that's not the point. The point isn't what you or I think about it. The point is they've sold over 3 million of these things. They've retired. They're still making them, made a fortune. Doesn't matter what we think. And, you know, in communications marketing, sometimes we can be too clever. We can be too superior. We can judge what people want. We want to put the values we have on our customer. And you know what? If you're too cool, you'll miss out. It's the same insight that Coca-Cola used as the family car sticker people used when they put people's name on a bottle. It was one of their most successful summer campaigns for years. Now, I look at that and I go, you know, it's just like the name on the little bike number plate you had when you were a kid. But again, people bought these in droves. Coca-Cola was in decline and it managed to turn around their business by putting people's names onto an iconic product. It's the same insight a little local coffee shop I've heard of uses. They put people's names on their mugs. So their regular customers come in, they walk up behind the counter, they get their own cup with their own name on it, they walk up to the barista, they hand them their cup, and he knows exactly the coffee they want to have. Because that's a business that know most of their money comes from their regulars, and they know what those regulars want.
Brought to you by businessblueprint.com.au.